Saipan tells the thrilling story of Roy Keane's shock exit before the 2002 World Cup, but has raised some eyebrows in Irish sports journalism. The movie is not as historically inaccurate as, say, Mel Gibson's Braveheart, but there is one particular aspect that many journalists have called into question. As many people watching might know, Ireland manager Mick McCarthy grew up in Barnsley in England, and his father was from Waterford in Ireland. Because of his Irish background, Mick represented Ireland both as a player and as a manager. At a press conference for Ireland's 2002 World Cup qualification playoff against Iran, Mick was asked a question that resulted in a stunned silence. An Iranian journalist asked Mick if having an English manager was a distraction to the Irish team, to which Mick responded, "Say if your father left because he couldn't get work at home, and he ended up going to England where there were lots. And say if your father had a son who grew up speaking English with an English accent. Now, does that mean the boy isn't entitled to call himself Iranian?" This quote is included in the movie and seen as a central part of the story. And although this aspect of Irish identity is an interesting theme to explore, it might not be that relevant to what happened later on. While training at Saipan in preparation for the 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan, Roy Keane did an interview with a journalist that has now gone down in Irish history. Keane broke down just how substandard he thought the Irish training facilities were and how he didn't rate Mick McCarthy as a manager. When this interview was published, Mick invited the entire squad into a room and gave Roy the chance to say what he thought about Mick to his face. And when Mick accused Roy of faking an injury, all hell broke loose. Keane launched into a series of insults and expletives, but there was one incident that stood out. Keane had supposedly made remarks about Mick only being English or insufficiently Irish. According to the Daily Mirror, Keane allegedly told McCarthy, "The only reason I have any dealings with you is that somehow you are manager of my country, and you're not even Irish, you English C-word. You can stick it up your B-word." In the Irish Times it was reported there were shocked whispers afterwards that Keane had questioned McCarthy's Irishness. And this certainly happens in the movie, but with slightly less vulgar language. The reality is that these comments would not have just been an insult to Mick, but half of the Irish squad. Before Mick McCarthy, Ireland was managed by Jack Charlton, who took full advantage of what has become known as the Granny Rule. Under FIFA rules, a player can represent the nation if a grandparent was born in that country, and this led to a lot of English-born footballers playing for the Irish team. By 2002, 12 members of the Irish squad were born outside of Ireland, and this became somewhat of a sensitive topic. In fact, there is even a derogatory term for these people called plastic paddies. The reality is that there was a spectrum of what motivated these players to wear the green jersey. Some of them did it to improve their careers, but there are players like Kevin Kilbane, David Connolly, Gary Breen and others who always considered themselves Irish despite being born on English soil. So the fact that Keane raised this very sensitive topic made it a very good news story. However, the Irish Times carefully said that Keane's remarks were whispers. And towards the end of the summer of 2002, when Keane was promoting his new autobiography, he was asked point blank if he said these words. In an interview with The Observer, Sean O'Hagan asked, "So you didn't, in the heat of the moment, have a go at McCarthy for not being Irish?" And Keane responded, "No way. That was reported in a lot of places. It irritated me because the people over there could have killed that stuff, but they chose not to." O'Hagan then asked, "You've no problems whatsoever with McCarthy being an Englishman in charge of Ireland?" Keane then responded, "No, none whatsoever. God almighty, no. Look at Jack Charlton. He did brilliant for Irish football, and good on him. No, they let that one roll, and they should have killed it." O'Hagan then pressed him further and said, "And you are certain, again given the heat of the moment, that you did not employ the term an English C-word?" Keane then said, No way. I have to live in England, and to be accused of saying that sort of thing, it's not nice for my wife and my family." But they let that run too. The FAI could have killed that, and Mick could have killed that. Keane's autobiography was later published and contained an interesting anecdote about what happened after he had his angry outburst with McCarthy. Keane wrote, "At midnight there was a knock on the door. Who the F is that, I wondered. It was Gary Breen and David Connolly, two young lads I'd got to know better on the trip. They liked to work in the gym, as I did, and we got to know each other over a few days." "Everything alright with you, Roy?" Gary asked. "Yeah, I'm fine, lads. A little bruised, but I'm okay." So they said, We'd just like to say that we agreed with everything you said about facilities and things. You were right, but who are we to say anything? I was moved. For many people, this particular story was evidence that Keane had not made those comments about Mick being English. Ken Early wrote in the Irish Times, "Only 2 players went to see Keane afterwards to express sympathy or regret over what had happened. They were Gary Breen and David Connolly. Neither would have been in the mood to do so if he'd just called them plastic patties." Niall Quinn, who had fallen out with Roy during the World Cup, also made some very interesting comments in his autobiography too. He wrote, "Then there's the English C-word business. Somebody has decided that this was one of the phrases that Roy threw at Mick. It wasn't, but it's a sensitive area to start digging into. Players raised as Irish people in England were in the room that night, and they know it wasn't said. But reading it now as fact, they must wonder, is English a key part of the insult? If Mick McCarthy can be regarded as English, what about me? Are we all the same here, or are we not?" Quinn argued that this was a story that got lost through the grapevine. He wrote, "Every knock on my door brings something new. Every phone call that comes into the hotel muddies the water a little more." And then, reviewing the movie Saipan, the journalist Conor McKeown wrote in the Irish Independent, not to be a stickler here over what is, after all, a film, but according to everyone who was in that room who has spoken about it since, this never happened. Saipan was about many things, but Mick McCarthy's Irishness was not one of them. And recently, Kevin Kilbane also spoke out and said, "The showdown in the team meeting embellishes what actually happened. It needs to be said as many times as possible that Roy did not call Mick an English C-word. The C-word was used, repeatedly, but I think the lads born in England would remember Roy prefacing it with English. He did say that Mick should not be managing my country. Roy still lives in England. He raised his family in England." It is a funny movie, not to be mixed up with a serious one that is in pursuit of the facts. And then watching Saipan, there is a humorous tone to it which suggests that this is not a 100% truthful documentary. I probably don't need to tell you that. Unlike in the movie, Mick McCarthy did not keep a framed photo of Jack Charlton with him in his bedroom. Ultimately, I thought that Saipan was an enjoyable movie in every other respect and an incredible performance from Eanna Hardwicke as Roy Keane. But let me know what you thought of the movie in the comments below, and like and subscribe for more.